she did not like. Fur was a big one. The sensation of a feather. Like the leaves, a flower. It's so complicated and confusing. It immediately blistered up. She just kind of wiped the skin on her shirt. Hey everybody, it's Val from Autistic Interpretations, and it's time for another Q&A. In today's Q&A, I'm going to talk about tactile defensiveness. So what is tactile defensiveness? It's a form of sensory processing disorder. So does that mean that Jessica is more sensitive to all sensations or just some? Stay tuned and listen to me tell you about the time she burned her fingers on an iron and the skin was coming off her hands. Tactile defensiveness. So what is tactile defensiveness? I'm going to start first with sensory processing disorder. I think a lot of people have heard of sensory processing disorder. It's very common in autistic people. You can have a sensory processing disorder and not be autistic. And so it just means your brain processes sensations, and it can be tactile sensations. It could be audio. It can be smells, etc. Jess has always had tactile defensiveness, which means certain textures and sensations have a very negative implication for her. It can be very interesting, the things that she's sensitive to and the things that she is not sensitive to. A couple of things we noticed very early on in her life that she was sensitive to, that she did not like the touch of. Fur was a big one, always. Since she was really small, she did not like to touch fur. And, even like the softer the fur, the more she didn't like it. Like cat fur. Another thing that you would not really think somebody would be bothered by, but that would be like a feather, the sensation of a feather. And then another big one that we noticed very, very early on is plants, like the leaves, a flower, things like that. So it's just very interesting to me because those are all very soft things, and those are things that bother her. Also, with tactile defensiveness, you have issues related to, or you can have issues related to texture. So for her, eating certain things, texture issues in her mouth, that's also a part of a tactile defensiveness. And you've got she does not like cold stuff in her mouth, although there are a few cold things she will tolerate. Pudding being one of them. She likes to eat chocolate pudding. And she, of course, likes ice cream. Although when she was very young, one day she asked me if I could warm it up. So even something like ice cream that we all understand is cold and supposed to be cold, and if it's not cold, it melts, whatever. One time, a long time ago, Jessica said, can you heat my ice cream up? I'm trying to think of what other things. So with the tactile defensiveness and the preferences with how things feel in your mouth, that bleeds over into food preferences, of course. And I can relate to that a little bit. I'll also have a lot of texture issues with food. And I understand the struggle to make myself have a meal or have an entree or have whatever that is a texture that I struggle with. So I understand that it's a real struggle for her. On the other side of all of this, there's this complex factor of Jessica's brain structure. So if you didn't know, Jessica is missing a section of her brain, and that is the cause of her vision impairment. So the occipital lobe back here on the left side is missing. And that's why she's totally blind in her right eye. And then she has damage on the other side of her brain back there. And that's why she's impaired on her left eye as well. So along with the damage or the missing part of her brain, she's got part of it's missing and part of it's damaged from hydrocephalus. And it's not all isolated into one area in her brain. So it goes in deeper. It's not just back here. So that impacts all kinds of things, and that's why she is so complex. So one of the things that is interesting along with the tactile defensiveness and the fact that she's sensitive to things like fur, plants, and feathers, stuff like that, the way she experiences heat is different. Most of you have seen her eat foods that have just come off the stove. Hot, hot, hot would burn most of our mouths. She's not impacted by that. She has burned her mouth. She can burn her mouth. But most of the time she eats stuff and it just doesn't faze her. And one story I wanted to tell about this kind of thing and how it's so complicated and confusing. Also, when she was younger, once she came up to me, I was ironing on an ironing board. And she did something. Her arm came up, her hand came up, and the back of her fingers touched the iron. And she didn't have any reaction to it other than she did that. So, like, she had like a 3rd-degree burn, I guess. It immediately blistered up. And her only reaction was to do this. She just kind of wiped the skin on her shirt and went about her business. It was very, very concerning. We talked to the neurosurgeon about, what does that mean and that kind of thing. And so it's interesting. She can be like, a paper cut is nearly the end of the world. She can't stand the way a paper cut feels. But then she had this episode where she burned her hand that bad and didn't even notice it or barely noticed it. Extreme weather temperatures don't bother her usually, so she doesn't mind being out in the cold. She doesn't mind being out when it's super hot. I don't know that I've ever heard her really complaining about heat when we've been outside in the heat. I think a lot of times people see Jessica's reaction to the dogs jumping. When people see her saying, "Ah," about the dogs jumping, that is part of her tactile defensiveness, but it is also a choice that she makes. She made a choice to have another dog, and she wants a dog. She wants the dog to be close. She wants to learn to pet them. She wants to learn to tolerate them. So when people that don't understand all of the whole big picture see that, sometimes they're like, I can't believe you let the dogs in the house, or I can't believe, why don't you make the dogs not do this? And we strive to find a balance here with everybody figuring everybody out. So the dogs figure Jessica out. They understand over time that her toleration for certain things is less. Zoe figured it out in a day or two when she moved in. Daryl is still figuring it out, but getting there. And Benny has a long way to go to understand it. She's doing better with the poodle fur than she did other dog fur. So that's interesting. So if y'all have any questions about Jessica and tactile defensiveness, please let me know. Comment below. Ask any questions. There's a lot more science in there that I can answer or explain if you have specific questions about that. But that's what tactile defensiveness is. It's part of it's a form of sensory processing disorder, and a big part of who Jessica is, and what has shaped her life and shapes our lives is just one of the many, many factors. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have questions. Bye.